Hello and welcome to Season 5, Episode 7 of Logicast, the AWS News podcast brought to you by Logicata. I'm Carl Robinson, CEO and co-founder of Logicata, and I'm joined today, as always, by my colleague, Principal Cloud Engineer at Logicata, John Goodall. How are you doing today, John?
Oh, I'm not so bad. My foot
Good,
hurts, as ever.
Oh, still on that specific
Different
injury.
thing.
What have
Yeah.
you done this time?
Well, you might see from the viewers will notice I've got a thing saying liquid skin is rubbish, because it is. It's terrible. It's kind of what I've done a couple of weekends ago now. The reason I've got massive blisters kind of everywhere is I did 100 rounds of sparring at an event, right? And that was 2.5, 3 hours, something like that. And I keep finding new injuries cropping up after the fact, because the big ones have started to sort of go away, and the way your body works is you only really notice the biggest problem at the time. So now I've got lots of little ones to solve. And I've got a couple of them underneath my toes, where the skin kind of joins to the foot, and they've just opened, and that's horrendous. And
Are you saying you have webbed feet then?
No, I'm saying my toes connect to my foot.
Oh, that's good, yeah. Because if they were no longer connected, then that would be a problem. Yeah,
that would be a different problem. Yeah, and I thought, because it's a really awkward spot to get anything in, I thought I'd try a bit of liquid skin, which is like super glue, but not really. It's terrible. It's terrible. It's horrible.
Is that the brand?
I don't know. It might be the brand. I'm sure other brands are available.
Okay. Well, I'm just checking we're not breaching any broadcasting contraventions by slagging off somebody's brand. But
well, fortunately, we're not on the BBC.
No, not yet. No, no ambition to be either. Anyway, let's stop waffling on about injuries and bad remedies, and let's introduce today's guest. We are delighted to be joined by Kai, fellow AWS community builder from Vietnam, who we were just discussing, we believe, is our first Vietnamese guest on the podcast. So how are you doing today, Kai?
Yeah, I'm feeling so good because in Vietnamese it's currently just holiday. Yeah, I'm very happy to celebrate the holiday and welcome everyone to the podcast in the first time. Yeah.
So Kai, tell us a bit about what you do for a living and what you do in the Community Builder program.
I am a DevOps engineer in my current company. Then so I manage the all infrastructure in it. Then I also AWS community builder with Serverless gallery, because I always sharing the Lambda infrastructure, then Serverless architect to my website, my company. Yeah.
So do you have your own website, or is that your company's website that you're talking about there?
Yeah, I have a product using our serverless architect. Yeah, it's your it's your Lambda container for front end, Lambda function for back end, and anything that's building by Lambda.
Awesome. Well, I think we've got a couple of serverless articles in our list to talk about today. But before we do, as regular listeners to the podcast will know, once a week I curate a list of AWS news, which I share via my weekly AWS News Roundup newsletter. And then John picks a selection of the articles that we'd like to discuss with our guests. So we have, of course, shared such a selection of articles with Kai ahead of the weekend. And the first of those articles is indeed about serverless technology. So this, and I think we've spoken about this on the podcast before, perhaps.
Yeah, last week.
Sure John will enlighten us as to why we're talking about it again. But this is an article on the AWS database blog where we the title is Simplified Cross-Account Stream Processing with AWS Lambda and DynamoDB. So I think we spoke about the feature announcement last week. This is a blog post which goes into a little bit more detail about that new feature that is available. So John, why are we talking about it again? And
well, because the author bought me dinner after the AWS North Conf.
Oh, lovely! Yeah,
yeah. So I've met Lee. Lee's a nice guy, and he at the time back then was something to do with the DynamoDB experts team. I forget the exact thing. I think he's moved into the service team or the feature, whatever it is they call it. But of all people to write about why you'd want this with DynamoDB, he's probably the right person to be kind of the authoritative service. Lee as a service. That's the thing now. The authority, the authority on this feature. So that's kind of why I picked it. And last week, Danielle and I really couldn't come up with more than a handful of reasons why you'd want this. And I thought we'd kind of dive in a little bit more with from the horse's mouth, as it were. And the three kind of architectural patterns, we kind of came to this, I think, last week, but centralized data processing, data lake, data warehouse, that kind of thing, shared services, audit logging, which kind of is the same thing, I guess, and then multi-tenants, which we hadn't come up with. So I thought, oh, we missed that one. Let's kind of dig into that a little bit. And the short version, because this is, again, it's got those kind of that drawing style of diagrams that you find very often, that's obviously done by a computer, but it looks like it's all hand drawn. I really enjoy that, so I thought I'd pick that out too. But the short version of what you'd want, why you'd need this, as we kind of came to the conclusion last week, you've got your central stuff, data warehouse, data lake kind of things, or audit logging, that kind of thing, where you might want to do that cross account. Fine. And then the third one is kind of flipping that on its head, which I hadn't considered, where the Dynamo table sits in the middle and things come into it, as it were. It's pushing out rather than going in, but rather than the outcome being another table in another account, the outcome is things in other accounts are able to read from this central source, which is, I hadn't considered that at all. And that's a really interesting kind of event-driven setup, wherein, again, you've got, I think of it from an ETL perspective, because that's kind of what I've got a lot of experience with, because clearly I was a horrible person in a past life to have dealt with ETL in this one. But you've got some sort of central table where things are loaded in, and then streams push it out to where they're processed, and they're processed in different ways for different purposes. So I thought that was really a clever use for this setup. It talks you through how you do that, things like resource policies in streams and all the rest of it. But it's a really interesting use case that we hadn't come to, so I thought it was worth highlighting that. And yeah, I saw a name that I knew in the author's tag and went, "Oh, I'll pick that."
Fair enough. What about yourself, Kai? What are your thoughts on this? Is any opinions on this article?
Yeah, I think the button is actually very common in banking. Yeah, we usually speak a lot about multi-account for strong isolation, like separating broad audit and different business domain. So yeah, that's a really interesting shift in the thinking. Instead of replication data into another table in another account, you keep a central source and let other account consume from it. Yeah, then from the security, that can actually be cleaner. You keep the data ownership in one place, and you resource basis policy or AM control to define exactly who can read from the stream. Yes.
Hadn't considered the security element. That's an interesting one, because you're not having to punch quite so many holes. I mean, I feel very mixed about this, as we kind of discussed last week with Danielle. I feel very mixed about the security side of things, because before this, you had to be very considered and very sure about what you were doing when you were punching holes in the account boundary. And with this, it's a lot easier to do that. But it also means it's a lot easier to get it right. So, interesting view. Yeah, interesting thought.
Yeah, I guess that's before this. Whenever you cross account boundary, you had to be extremely carefully. Then every permission feel like punching a hole in the wall. With this approach, it's become easier and more structured. You are not creating lots of custom church path anymore. You define a set more controlled policy driven way. From the security standpoint, I actually see it as making things easier to get right. Yeah, fewer moving parts, cleaner ownership, and more standard control. Yeah.
Cool. Well, there we go. A use case that we'd not considered last week, and improved security over the traditional ways of doing things. So on that note, let's move on to our second article for this week. And I don't know whether you class containers as serverless or not, John, but this is an article on the this is an article on the AWS DevOps and Developer Productivity blog, all about choosing between Amazon ECS Blue Green Native or AWS CodeDeploy in CDK. So obviously ECS Blue Green, I think, is a new feature that was announced fairly recently. No, not a new feature.
No, not really. About a year old now.
Yeah. Okay.
Which, I mean, well, in geologic terms, it's quite new. In AWS, it's old news.
Newer than Blue Green in CDK, I guess. Yeah.
I don't know. I don't really know CDK. Yeah. I didn't really want to pick on this because of the whole CDK element. You find these things where they kind of, I don't know, they've got a quota to hit about you must talk about such and such a service, or you must talk about such and such a feature, or in order to get it into the DevOps and Dev Productivity, Dev Tooling kind of blog, you have to put in a dev tool rather than just talking about features of services, maybe. So maybe that's why it's got a CDK slant. I'm not a big CDK user, and I don't really care for CDK in terms of this post, right? I don't really use CDK, so I don't have an opinion on whether it's good or bad, because it's just not a tool that I particularly interact with. But I thought it worth talking about this because this is something I've actually built, and I've done this both ways, and I've run the numbers, I suppose. I've been up and down on it both ways, and I thought this was a really interesting thing to weigh on. So, as you say, newish, July 2025, so about 6 months ago now, I was wrong. You could do ECS Blue Green natively, right? Before that, you had to do it in CodeDeploy. I've built it in CodeDeploy around that time, and then it came out native, and I went, sod it, I'll keep it in CodeDeploy because I'd already built it, so it's kind of staying there. And then after that, you could do it directly within the ECS service without needing CodeDeploy. But there's still reasons that you'd want to use CodeDeploy, and this kind of again runs the numbers on that. So let's do with what it is first. If you haven't heard of a blue-green deployment, what rock have you been living under? But you might be new to the industry, so that's fair. The short version in a blue-green deployment, doesn't matter what the architecture is or what the technology is, right? You bring up a new thing of whatever it is you're deploying. Might be servers, might be containers, might be Lambda, doesn't really matter. You make sure that comes up, that's clean, that's working, not throwing any errors. You shift traffic to it in a number of patterns. You could do it all at once. You could do it in sort of canary 5% and then move the rest over. You could do linear, so you move 10% every 10 minutes until everything's moved across, whatever you like. In theory, yeah. And then you kill off the old stuff, provided that nothing's errored. The upshot of blue-green is that if your new stuff starts throwing errors, you've still got the old stuff hanging around, and you can just move traffic back across, and your customer interruption is much lower than it would be if you had to do a full hard rollback, as it were, or roll forward to new state, because your existing previous stuff is still there. Blue-green is the common term for it. It used to be called red-black for some reason, but they changed it to blue-green. I don't know why they changed the colors, but they did. I'm sure there was a reason that I'm sure I'm not the reason for it. I'm sure it's, I'm sure there's a good reason, but whatever.
Well, red-black sounds a bit more like a gamble, I guess, on the roulette table.
Maybe.
You don't really want this to be a gamble, do you? I hope it works. That. Yeah.
Yes. Maybe it's to help Gamblers Anonymous. I don't know. What this is talking about, though, is why you'd want one versus the other. And as I say, it puts it in a CDK slant, presumably, so because I had to talk about CDK. I don't much care for that. The two kind of flavors of it, though, is if you do it in ECS natively, you get much fewer events to kind of tack things into around the edges. Okay, so it'll still bring the new stuff up, it'll still move traffic across, it can still do it in a number of policies, so canary, linear, all at once, and it'll still plug into CodeDeploy, so you don't have to code pipeline, the other code something, it'll still plug into code pipeline, so you can still do all your pipelines, and that all still works. Wonderful. There's a handful of differences, though, because CodeDeploy offers more in terms of percentage change and that kind of deal, right? It also offers a bake period so that you can do it takes 10 minutes before it's available type thing if you've got like big data migrations to run. It does support more canary and linear shifting options. So I think ECS, as I was wrong, only lets you do all at once. So there's a few kind of extras there. And CodeDeploy has a whole suite of lifecycle events that you can tack things into. And this depends on the technology you're deploying to, right? Because Lambda, ASG, or ECS has different event names, but it's things like before traffic, after traffic, before and after deploy or install, these kind of things, which ECS doesn't have any of those features. So if you need slightly more advanced rather than just all at once, or you have certain things you need to do at certain points in time, as in my applications come up, I now need to run migration processes, or I need to do a big data load, or whatever, or your process takes a long time to become available before it can start accepting traffic, you still need to go with CodeDeploy. But if you only have a very basic need to, I want new one to get old one up, new one to come up, move traffic across, bang, happy days, and so long as it then has the automatic rollback, then you can save yourself quite a bit of faff and just stay within the ECS service. As I say, it seems to have picked on CDK as a reason just to talk about CDK, and then there's some CDK kind of code snippets and what have you as well, which is it's great if you use it. But the article for me is much more useful generally in saying that you don't have to do it kind of the full featured way. There's now a slimmed down version if you don't need the full feature set.
What are your thoughts on this, Kai? Any experience with blue-green deployments?
Yeah, I just have experience with blue-green deployment with ECS. Yeah, I haven't working with the ECS before, but yeah, I kind of see deploy. Maybe the task where CodeDeploy still side. It give we more flexibility. Things like canary or linear traffic shifting presented by rollout or longer pay or validation period. Yeah. So if you need more control over how traffic move and more time to observer behavior, CodeDeploy still work really well. Yes, ECS native is similar, but CodeDeploy give you more tuning curve. Yes.
Yeah.
It's the opinionated versus do-it-yourself sort of approach, which AWS has done in a number of services. So AWS is great at providing you the building blocks and then letting you get on with it and kind of do it however you want to do. And historically, they've been somewhat poorer at here is a way that works for 80% of people, right? Because 80% and, statistics, 93% of stats are made up on the spot. So 80% of people don't need all of these extra sort of bits and pieces. I would wager, certainly from my experience of the handful of these that I've built, a good percentage of them haven't needed these extra lifecycle hooks, or it doesn't really matter that you haven't had the ability to canary traffic, because you cut across and it will auto roll back if something blows up and you've got your CloudWatch alarms. So the fact that you've cut across and then cut back again, you're not Netflix. It doesn't matter if your entire customer base has an outage for 2 minutes. You're going to cope with that. You don't need the 5% kind of targets because you've got ridiculous traffic. So like I say, I reckon it's probably 20% of people that still need to use CodeDeploy, but generally speaking, you're probably okay to use ECS just directly. 93% of stats are made up on the spot.
Yeah.
Do you remember the Twitter account Made Up Stats? I don't know if you ever saw that. Back when Twitter was fashionable.
Yes.
Yeah, a whole account. It was called Made Up Stats, and it just constantly spewed out fictitious statistics, but it was quite amusing. Some of them are quite funny. I don't know if it exists in any way, shape, or form on any current social media platform, but you just reminded me of that when you made up that particular stat there. Anyway, let's move on from making up statistics to our next article, which is published by an AWS hero on dev.to, Vivek. and this the title of the article is "How AWS Support Saved Me $530 and Why You Should Check Your QuickSight Settings Right Now." And I picked on this one because I think this may have happened to one of our customers. I don't know if you're familiar with that, John, but certainly I spotted a ticket recently about QuickSight. I think it was prices doubling, and I wondered whether this was the same issue. I didn't drill into the ticket particularly, but a couple of interesting things. One the QuickSight side of things, but the other one being able to get a refund from AWS Support without being on a particular support plan. We've leveraged that a couple of times on behalf of customers. So yeah, what are your thoughts on this one, John?
So this sort of thing annoys me a bit. Not the fact that they managed to get their money back and here's how you can avoid it. That's absolutely fine. And, learn and grow and have mistakes in public and all the rest of it. It's exactly what you expect from AWS Hero. I've done something similar. It wasn't with QuickSight or whatever it is. Yeah, it wasn't with QuickSight. I just did something really silly with Control Tower and spun up a load of NAT gateways and then had a bill for about 700 English pounds. So it was about $1,300 or something. And I got the majority of that back again. I didn't ask for all of it back because it was across 2 different billing months. And I kind of thought, well, I need to take some of that on the chin because I should know better. But, it was kind of, I got a good chunk of that back as well, but it did take a long time. But this sort of thing, the fact that it's so easy to get so many things wrong, even though AWS are doing things in the free tier space and making it easier to get things right and easier to not spend $1,000 of your own money or whatever it is, it annoys me because it's still very possible to do. Now, the problem here was, if I find it, there were a handful of things that Vivek did that were wrong, effectively. Didn't set budget alerts, didn't set any kind of reminders or any of that sort of thing, had a whole load of queue fees that they didn't know about, did stuff in a promotional period that cost $30 or whatever it was, and then got out of the promotional period and the bill went from this to that, right? It just went to the stratosphere. And that billing fee, that charge kind of annoys me because if you look at the heading, the billing pattern that tripped me up, December 25, no queue fee, promotional waiver. Jan 26, no queue fee, promotional waiver. Feb 26, $70 prorated, promo ended at the end of January. Okay, you've gone from nothing, $70. That's a bit naughty as far as I'm concerned. And there's a few other bits and pieces in here as well that were really naughty. So promotional waiver for QuickSight, $250 a month had ended. There was a reader capacity pack that didn't know about. You're on the hook for mandatory queuing QuickSight fee, and another $250 for a pro user. There's just a lot of charges here that if you're a hero and you can get tripped up by this, if you're a CB and you do this sort of thing for a living all day, every day, and you can get tripped up by it, it just tells me that the pricing model is still wrong. It's still too hard to get right.
Yeah, it doesn't mention whether he received any notifications about this. Obviously, you do receive a lot of notifications from AWS if you're running multiple workloads in AWS. So whether there were any notifications he missed, that's not a part of the post. But what are your thoughts on this, Kai? Have you ever been tripped up by an AWS bill and managed to get the money back?
Yeah, maybe there will be many mistakes that can cost money. So I think I will tell you my story. Yeah, a while back I was starting a new iOS service during the promo period. Everything was super cheap at the first time, so I just enabled open a feature and kind of forgot about it. Then a month later, I suddenly saw a bill list by nothing crazy like 1,000, but enough to make me stop and double check everything. Turn out the promo had the and some filter had the auto rolled into pay mode, kind of like what happened in the website story where the chart came from Pandora future after promotion is applied. Yeah, what I learned from that were pretty simple. The dangerous part isn't using new service, is forgetting the lifecycle. Then default chain, some feature keep peeling quietly in the background. Since then, I always set budget alert and uh, calendar remind. Uh, if I and then if I make a mistake, I will bet the arrest partner to cover this cost. Yeah.
And did you get your money back? Did you try and get your money back when you made that mistake? Or
Yeah. After I back arrest partner, yeah, money is will recover for me. Yeah.
good. Well, we've had a few scenarios like that, I think, John, where not with QuickSight necessarily, but where we have successfully got refunds.
Yeah,
well, you've described one already, but we've done it on behalf of customers a couple of times as well, I think.
Yeah, it happens. I was wrong. Just to clarify something, Vivek did actually have budgets and CloudWatch alarms set, which meant that they were able to get the charges cancelled before it hit the credit card, which makes things a whole heap easier because they don't have to do billing, refunds, and all the rest of it. That's why I think it took me probably a couple of months to get my money back, because I noticed it on my credit card bill and went, well, have I paid $700 to? My bill was normally like a $5, and I paid about 700 quid. I'm like, what? Huh? Which, okay, fine. It was on my credit card, and credit cards have times you have to pay it and all the rest of it. But I had to eat that, and then I eventually got the money back kind of a few months later. But yeah, set your billing alarms. Do that now.
Yeah, set your billing alarms, set your budget alerts, etc. But if you do make a mistake, it is possible to get the money back, as we have experienced, and Kai has experienced, and as Vivek also experienced in this article. So let's move on to our next article for this week. And I do wonder how much of this 200 billion was from accidental spend versus intentional spend on AWS, but they do make a lot of money, don't they? So this is an article on the Register, all about the fact that Amazon can't build AI capacity fast enough and has thrown another $200 billion at the problem. So I think last week they announced, or the week before, that there's another 200 billion going into building data centers for AI, and Amazon CEO Andy Jassy is on record saying that they can't, as soon as they're launching new data center capacity, it's being monetized, and they just can't build it quickly enough. But the stock market doesn't seem to like this particular level of investment, and Amazon shares have been tanking a little bit since this announcement was made. Although I don't think it's only Amazon. I think the tech sector has been suffering a little bit recently overall. So whether or not there's a direct link between this and the shares tanking, hard to know. What are your thoughts on this, John? Amazon are monetizing it, but are Amazon customers monetizing it, do you think? Or is this all part of the bubble?
Yeah, I don't know. That's the question. Bubble gonna bubble. I genuinely think that AI is a bubble. The question is, will everything grow underneath it enough so when it does eventually pop, it's not a big bang? Because huge numbers of these services don't make money. They just don't. As far I haven't seen filings for it because I don't care. I don't go and look. But if you look at, say, OpenAI's model, in terms of you pay your $20 a month and you just get access to these advanced models, and the only limit is every so often you kind of have to, you run out of context, you have to restart your Windows, and they put some limits on things like image generation, but that's it. They're not making any money off of my usage, put it that way. They're making nothing off of me, and I'm doing my level best to cost them as much as I possibly can. And if you look at all the people using free tier stuff, and the fact that Gemini is baked into search now, and DuckDuckGo has got one baked into search, and all these other search engines have got AI baked into search, which you don't pay for, and they're all free. I've said this before, and I'll say it again. Genuinely, I think the way these things are being funded should be illegal, because Amazon buys stock in Anthropic. Anthropic uses the money that Amazon has given them in terms of stock offerings to commit to spend on Amazon's own platform. This is all funny money that's just moved around on spreadsheets, and it's just it's a bubble and it's going to pop. And I think the markets are starting to see that. I mean, I'm not a trader, I'm not an analyst, but I have eyes and a brain, and I'm a millennial, so I've lived through, I think, 5 once in a generation events in the space of a decade. So them when you see them, right? And I think the markets are starting to bear this out. Okay, there's a lot of things that are still going well for Amazon and AWS, and Amazon more generally, right? They still are the biggest compute provider in the cloud anywhere by a fair margin. I don't think they're the biggest or the best AI provider, but they are certainly up there if you want building blocks to do your own things with. It's really interesting, though, that normally capital investment keeps the markets happy because they want to see companies building and growing and doing new things, and building out capacity as part of that. But the fact that you've had 11 and a bit % drop off in spite of the fact of 35% margins, that something's not right, and maybe this is it.
What I thought was interesting in this article was that where he says if you look at the last 12 months, they've added 3.9 gigawatts of power, which was double what AWS had in 2022. And they expect it to double again by the end of 2027, which is just a ridiculous rate of growth in terms of data center capacity. What are your thoughts on this, Kai, on the AI bubble?
Let me think. Maybe the AI purple. I don't think it's a black or white. On one hand, the scale of spending is wide, doubling power capacity, hundreds of billion in capex. That definitely feel popular if you compare it to the previous cycle when infrastructure grow faster than clearly near-term revenue. Markets naturally get nervous. But on the other hand, unlike past bubble, they will demand already. Company are actively moving workloads by you committed multi-year spend. So it's not purely speculative. It's more like an over rotation around a real trend. Maybe my take is we might see a valuation bubble, but probably not a usage bubble.
Interesting. Another interesting thing I heard last week, I was at an AI networking event, and how's this all going to get paid for? Well, the same way that a lot of the internet is paid for, not the P word, but advertising. So apparently, a number of the LLM,
there's ads on that
AI,
too.
Well, there is ads on that, but it does pay for a lot of the internet. But apparently, advertising is coming in the chatbots. So ChatGPT, etc. You will be able to pay to have your company feature in the chatbot results, which I guess is no surprise. It's not there right now, but that's the way the internet has been working. That's the way search has been working. This is, certainly the chat side of AI is kind of the new search. A lot of people are not searching on Google anymore, or if they are, they're getting a Gemini result anyway, or they're asking ChatGPT.
Which is exactly how I found this. It's exactly how I found that this liquid skin thing existed. That was a crap result, wasn't it?
Well, I wonder if they paid to have it on there. So.
Maybe.
The same way the internet goes by far.
Yep, absolutely.
Yes.
Well, let's see. I'm sure the stock market will recover, and Amazon's shares will recover after this announcement. Somebody somewhere thinks that it's the right thing to do to invest another $200 billion in data centers and double capacity by 2027. But let's see if it's the right bet. Let's move on to our final article for this week, which is another article from the Register, and back on the subject of sovereign cloud. This one, the title is Europe's sovereign cloud spend set to triple as geopolitics bite. We've mentioned on the podcast previously that the AWS European Sovereign Cloud went to general availability in January of this year. But of course, lots of other clouds investing heavily, relatively heavily, in Europe as well. But not just Europe, of course. I think other countries are mentioned further down in this article, and more countries wanting to keep their data stored, processed, and managed by onshore entities, I guess. So, John, anything particular to say about this article?
So I have to be very careful about how I talk about US geopolitics for a number of reasons, but chiefly because I'm not an expert in any of these things, and therefore it's all opinion. And everyone's got one of those, but not everybody should share. But this is what we're here to do. So, right, European Sovereign Cloud. Generally, I like it conceptually, right? We've spoken about this a whole bunch because, we're in Europe, you and I. Europe as in Western Europe, not the EU. Let's not talk about Brexit because that's a whole other mess. European concerns over reliance on US hyperscalers stem from the US Cloud Act. And I'm quoting our read directly there. I don't know what cloud stands for. I love how the US does their acronyms because it's one of those forced acronyms. It will be, it'll be something with a C and something with an L, and it'll just force its way into being cloud. Wonderful. There has been a number of concerns about relying on US infrastructure and US infrastructure providers, even though the kit isn't necessarily in the US, because the way the American law works effectively is if the company is headquartered in the US, doesn't matter where anything is held, the US can say, I'd like some of that, please, and go and get the data, which makes people like, and I'm going to use a very specific example because they've gone on record before talking that they're unhappy about this, the German federal police. They're quite unhappy about that sort of thing. And they've gone on record about that, right? And I imagine there's a number of other kind of federal organizations in various states that are not happy about that. There's a whole heap of general kind of geopolitical stuff going on at the minute. And I'm not going to go into massive detail because that's a different podcast. There's lots of them out there, actually. So we don't need to go and rehash that because we're not politicians. What I find very interesting about this, and I've said this before, and a number of other people have said this before, working with US stuff is great because generally they're ahead of the game and ahead of the market in terms of innovation and invention, all the rest of it. But this sovereign cloud thing comes along, it's still actually run by the Americans, which sort of feels a little bit disingenuous to me. Yeah, they have technically isolated organizations or environments in Europe. Again, I'm quoting the article directly, but they have a governance structure around it, its own organization in Germany with managing directors and advisory boards, yada, yada, yada. But it's still a 100% subsidiary of Amazon Inc. So there's still things that flow up to the American entity, as it were. So the real question is, as we see growth in this platform, because it's going to grow, it just will. Anything Amazon touch is basically made of gold, I think, in terms of growth patterns. As we see growth in this platform accelerate, are we going to start to see the point at which the boundaries and the barriers start to come down again? Because allegedly there's these hardline boundaries because it's run by a German citizen. You could be sued in Germany. He's subject to German federal law and all the rest of it. But eventually the owner is still the American company who is still beholden to American laws. So we will see whether that bites. I don't know whether it will. I'd like to think it won't. But you have to be naive to think that the possibility isn't there that a European subsidiary of an American company will have to answer to American authorities at some point.
Just to clarify, the Cloud Act stands for Clarifying Lawful Overseas Use of Data. So there we go. That's what the Cloud Act stands for. But what are your thoughts on this, Kai? Is digital sovereignty, is that a concern in Vietnam for Vietnamese citizens? People looking to build data centers there and not have their data stored and processed outside the country, or is that not a thing in Vietnam just yet?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. It will be in Vietnam. Yeah, but I think Sean raised a valid concern. It's especially from the Arabian perspective, but coming from Asian, the framing feel a bit different. Yeah, maybe in many Asian markets, we are ready here to multi environment, different country with different data loads, cross border rejection, and localization requirement. So cloud isn't that new conceptually. It's more like error catching up to a pattern we were seeing elsewhere. Yeah, what I find interesting is the third layer. Even if the infrastructure is physically in error, the question become legal control versus operation control, and that not something technology alone can fully solve. Is ultimate government and uh, solution issue. Yeah. So from my perspective, cloud will definitely grow, but probably at a spectrum, not fully independent cloud overnight, but more hybrid model where country, balance, and cost and e-commerce local. Yes.
Cool. I guess the other thing to say about this is we did have a customer ask us a question about this recently about whether they should be thinking about it or not. But it all comes down to who can access your data. And if you're doing things properly in AWS, then if things are encrypted and you're managing the keys, etc., then nobody can, even if the Cloud Act enables the US government to swoop in and demand all of your data from Amazon, if it's properly encrypted and you manage the keys, then it's useless to whoever is requesting it anyway.
To be clear, I haven't read the Cloud Act, so I don't actually know what it kind of entitles the US government to. Just very clear, but I haven't actually read it.
But you have read the GDPR.
Yes, cover to cover.
Yeah. So you are the sort of person who probably would read the Cloud Act if you had the time. Maybe
yes.
Maybe that's one for this weekend. It's only Monday right now, but maybe bedtime reading this week is the Cloud Act.
Yeah, I think I might get 10 minutes in and then nod off. So probably the right thing for bedtime.
Well, on that note, before the listeners nod off, we have reached the end of our time for Season 5, Episode 7 of Logicast. So if you are still listening, thank you very much for listening. Hope you've enjoyed it. If you have enjoyed it, give us a like, give us a rating. Do tell your friends. We are available to download from wherever you download your podcasts. Just remains for me to thank you, John, for your insights, as always. And thank you, Kai, as well, for joining us, our first Vietnamese guest on the podcast. It's been great to have you along and to hear your insights as well. We will be back next week with another episode for you. In the meantime, thanks again for listening, and we'll speak to you again next time. Cheers.